Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're unlocking the artisanal magic behind some of the world's most complex and honestly fascinating beverages, fortified wines. Specifically, we're taking a deep dive into the sensory, highly regulated, and almost alchemical world of generous wines, looking really closely at the legendary wines of Jerez, better known to us as sherry. If you've ever wondered how a simple grape harvest transforms into a profound, layered masterpiece in a glass, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Just picture the rich, deep color and the incredible visual viscosity as this liquid cascades into a glass. This isn't just your standard table wine. What we're exploring today is a centuries-old artisanal tradition. It's this captivating concept of taking a standard young white wine, which, is already a beautiful thing on its own, and using incredible precision, timing, and science to transform it into an intricate, robust masterpiece. A masterpiece that can literally age for decades. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be covering 5 key areas: the magic of generous wines, hitting pause on the fortification process, choosing the right alcohol, the laws of Jerez, and finally, decoding sherry varieties. Let's jump in. Section 1. The magic of generous wines, crafting the foundation. Every great fortified wine begins with a highly specific grape, like Palomino for sherry or Touriga Nacional for port. The foundation just has to be perfect. The early production phase basically follows a 6-step roadmap. It starts, of course, with the harvest of those perfectly ripe grapes, either manually or mechanically, followed by destemming and crushing to release the must. Then comes step 3, fermentation. This is your standard biological process where yeast converts the natural sugars in the must right into alcohol. But right after this, the wine's destiny is forever altered. Step 4 is fortification, adding alcohol. From there, it moves into prolonged aging and maturation in oak barrels, and finally, classification and bottling. Now, immediately after that initial white winemaking phase, winemakers face a really crucial fork in the road when it comes to fortification. If they fortify the wine to precisely 15% ABV, it goes down the path of biological dynamic aging. That's how it becomes a Fino or Manzanilla. But if they fortify it slightly higher, say to 18%, it goes down a completely different path. It undergoes oxidative aging, eventually becoming an Oloroso. Just think about that. A mere 3% difference in alcohol completely changes the chemical future of the entire batch. Section 2. Hitting pause, the fortification process. This brings us to the actual core mechanism of generous wines, manipulating fermentation kinetics through a process called engabezado, which literally translates to fortification. I like to think of it as a giant pause button. Yeast cells, they're living organisms, right? And they can only survive up to a certain alcohol concentration. So, by intentionally adding alcohol to the fermenting must, the winemaker spikes the overall alcohol content so high that it literally stops the yeast dead in its tracks. The fermentation pauses instantly and permanently. And the timing of when you hit that pause button, that changes absolutely everything. If a winemaker fortifies during fermentation, they kill off the yeast before it has a chance to consume all the grapes and natural sugars. The result is a wine with high natural residual sugar, a sweet fortified wine. But if they wait and they fortify after the fermentation has naturally finished, well, the yeast has already consumed the sugar. This creates those classic bone-dry, generous wines like a traditional Fino sherry. So that timing gives the winemaker absolute direct control over the sweetness profile of the final product. Section 3. Choosing the right alcohol, the fortification agent. So you might be wondering, what exactly are they using to hit that pause button? It definitely isn't just any random spirit off the shelf. Winemakers generally choose from 3 distinct types of alcohol, heavily depending on regional laws. Neutral wine alcohol is the absolute favorite for generous wines. Clocking in at a massive 95 to 96% ABV, it's distilled from wine products but is entirely colorless, tasteless, and odorless. It raises the alcohol volume without altering the delicate organoleptic profile, the natural aromas and flavors of the base wine. Contrast that with wine brandy or pomace brandy, which sit between 52 and 86% ABV. Because these are distilled quite differently, often from grape skins or whole fermented wine, they actively impart specific, very strong flavors into the final blend. But for a pure sherry, neutral alcohol is the key. Section 4. The laws of Jerez, terroir and tradition. Welcome to the famous Jerez-Xérès-Sherry denomination of origin down in the south of Spain. This is a place where ancient rules and enological practices are fiercely preserved by law. The specific vineyard areas are situated right around Jerez, Sanlúcar de Barrameda, and El Puerto de Santa Maria. This region is home to the legendary Albarisa soils. These are brilliant white, chalky soils that reflect the intense Spanish sun and retain absolutely crucial moisture. To legally call a generous wine sherry, it has to come from this exact geographic triangle and adhere to incredibly strict legal regulations regarding exactly how it is grown, fortified, and aged. Section 5. Decoding sherry varieties, the classification system. Because of those extremely strict regional laws, the classification of these wines can seem wonderfully complex at first, but it is completely logical once you understand the rules. Let's start with the bone-dry styles, the true general wines. Legally, these must have less than 5 grams per liter of residual sugar, making them incredibly dry. Remember that 15% fortification path we talked about? That's what creates Fino and Manzanilla. At 15 to 17% ABV, a spontaneous, almost magical layer of yeast called flor forms right on top of the wine in the barrel, completely protecting it from oxygen, so it stays pale and crisp. But Oloroso, which is fortified to 17 to 22%, well, that higher alcohol kills the flor yeast. Without the flor, the wine is exposed to oxygen, resulting in these deep amber colors and rich, nutty, oxidative flavors. And what about an Amontillado? It's kind of the best of both worlds. It starts its life under flor and then finishes with oxidative aging. But what if the market wants something a bit sweeter? Well, residual sugar strictly and legally dictates the blended categories. If a wine has 5 to 45 grams of sugar per liter, it's categorized as dry. A medium sits between 45 and 115 grams, and a cream sherry, that is a carefully controlled sweet blend containing a massive 115 to 140 grams of sugar per liter. But here's the catch. Despite these incredible variations in sweetness, all of these maintain that elevated 15 to 22% ABV range. Now, beyond the blends, we have the heavy hitters, natural sweet wines. These are legally mandated to have more than 160 grams per liter of sugar. So how do they get that sweet naturally? It's through a really remarkable post-harvest sun-drying process. The grapes for Dulce, Moscatel, and Pedro Ximénez, which people often just call PX, are literally left out in the hot sun to dry and shrivel before pressing. This evaporates the water and concentrates the natural sugars to incredible syrupy levels. A true PX contains over 212 grams of sugar per liter. That creates an intensely dark, viscous, and just unforgettable sensory profile. Finally, generous wines truly reward patience. Extended maturation in oak barrels, done through a complex blending process known as the Solera system, elevates these wines into rare, legally protected categories based purely on their age. You have qualified aging for over 12 and 15 years. But the absolute pinnacles are VOS, meaning Vinum Optimum Signatum, which is guaranteed to be over 20 years old, and VORS, Very Old Rare Sherry, meticulously aged for over 30 years. Time, combined with controlled oxidation, unlocks an extreme aromatic complexity that you simply cannot rush. So we've traveled all the way from the harvest through the biochemistry of the pause button to the strict, sun-drenched laws of Jerez. Now, I'm going to leave you with a question. The next time you're looking at a menu or standing in a wine shop, which masterpiece of the Solera system will you choose? Will you reach for the crisp, pale perfection of a bone-dry, flor-aged Fino? Or will you opt for the dark, decadent, syrupy history of a sun-dried Pedro Ximénez? Take your new understanding of fermentation kinetics, read that label, and taste the alchemy for yourself. Thanks for joining me on this Explainer Focus Learners. Keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.